All right, before we jump in, I want to let you know that these are the first 3 modules, the first 3 classes of my full course, Pattern Making in Fashion Design, Part 1. These lessons are the foundation, the basics that you absolutely need in order to build strong pattern making skills and techniques. So, let's get started. Hello everyone, welcome. My name is Nino Villa and I'm your instructor. For those of you who enrolled in my first course, who watched the first course called How to Create a Fashion Collection and Launch Your Own Brand, you know that I was an instructor at FIDM, F-I-D-M, the Fashion Institute of Design and Merchandising in Los Angeles, where I taught many classes like sketching and draping and pattern making, collection development, and many more. If you haven't watched my first course, I encourage you to do so because it'll give you a really good idea of the overall picture and the process of creating a collection and launching your own brand. This second course is about pattern making and some draping. And I say some draping because many times a pattern is developed by first draping on a dress form, which I'll show you in a minute, and then taking that drape and drafting a pattern from it. Pattern making and draping go hand in hand. And in fact, you will see me going back and forth between pattern making and draping. Because the first concept and question that we need to address is, how do you take a two-dimensional piece of paper, a pattern, and create a three-dimensional shape and design from it? In this course, you will learn basic principles of pattern making, such as dart manipulation, adding fullness. You will learn techniques such as pivoting and slashing and spreading. And you will learn a whole bunch of new words and terminology such as slopers and blocks and darts and pleats and tucks and shirring, princess seam style lines, yokes, seam allowance, etc. So we'll go over all the tools necessary to make patterns. And in fact, speaking of tools, let's start with the tools needed to draft a pattern or patterns. So we'll start with scissors, and there's 2 kinds of scissors that you should get. I'm gonna be very professional about this, and if you were in the industry or looking forward to going into the industry, you will need 2 kinds of scissors. This one is used to cut paper. When I say paper, there's 2 kinds of paper. There's manila paper, which is, it's not really cardboard, but it's sort of stock paper. And then there's also dotted paper, sort of more of a lightweight dotted paper. So if you were cutting paper, you would use these scissors. Otherwise, just a regular, normal pair of scissors for fabric. And in this course, we'll use a fabric called muslin to drape patterns. You will need a pencil, very sharp pencil, and a ruler, an 18-inch clear. This bends, you can see it, it's flexible, 2-inch by 18-inch clear ruler. You will need pins, regular pins, not safety pins. These are just straight pins, okay? You will need a French curve. I don't know if you can see it. I'm gonna hold it against a darker background. This is a French curve. Okay, it has a certain shape to it. See that? You will need a hip curve. It has a certain shape. This is a hip curve. You will need a tracing wheel. Tracing wheel. There's different variations, but they're all pretty much the same. This little wheel that turns with little teeth at the end. You will need an awl. A-W-L. Spell A-W-L. A notcher. This is a notcher, and it makes, you can hear the clicking, it makes notches. Scotch tape, good old scotch tape, and stapler. And along with stapler is a staple remover to remove staples, okay? These are the most important tools necessary. There's a few more things, but these are the essential tools needed to draft patterns, okay? In the next class, we'll start with principles and techniques on pattern drafting, and we'll get going. So I'll see you next class. Hello again, welcome back. In the last class I mentioned that I'd be going back and forth between pattern making and draping. Now this is not a draping class, but you remember I mentioned, or I asked the question, how do you take a two-dimensional piece of paper or fabric and turn it into a three-dimensional shape? Well, I'm going to show you. So this is a dress form, not to be confused with a mannequin, because a mannequin is what you see in the window of a store for display purposes. This is a dress form. A dress form in the industry is used to drape, for draping purposes obviously, and for fitting purposes. All these seams here have a name. So let's get familiar with some of these new terminology. For example, this center seam here in the front is called center front. This here is a princess line or princess seam. It goes from the shoulder across the bust to the waistline. We have a side seam, a shoulder seam. We have a neckline and a waistline. The bottom of the tape, not the middle, not the top, but the bottom of the tape is the waistline. And then the center of the bust is called the apex. It's very important to know where the center is because everything comes from the apex. You'll see in the next session how I'm going to show you certain pivoting principles and techniques, and the apex is really important in that. I have taken a piece of muslin and I've pinned it on the form. I have a pencil mark across it, kind of dividing it in half, and it's across the apex. And it's straight across, it's parallel to the floor. This is a straight across line, parallel to the floor. I've pinned it, and now again, this is not a draping class, so I'm not gonna spend time showing you how to drape this. But in 30 seconds, I'm gonna show you a concept on how to take a two-dimensional piece of fabric, and you see this extra fabric right here, this extra fullness? Well, I'm going to pinch it and fold it to create a dart. And I'll do the same thing with the top portion. See this extra fullness right here? Well, I'm going to fold it, I'm going to pinch it and fold it down like this so that I can create a dart. For those of you who don't know what a dart is, I will explain that soon enough. But you can see that it's beginning to take shape. Now we have some kind of a shape to it. Now these are darts, but they could be tucks or pleats or shirring and so on. We'll get to that. Now at this point I would mark it. I would take a pencil and mark all the information necessary that I would take and transfer it to dotted paper. Okay, so I have marked my muslin with a pencil. I put certain cross marks on my muslin, my side seam, my waistline, neckline, etc. And I've pinned my darts temporarily, so you can see there's a certain shape to it. Now I'm going to remove this muslin, remove the pins. You can see there's a certain three-dimensional shape to it. And now I'm going to remove all the pins, and when it's all said and done, my muslin now with all the proper markings looks like this. See these markings indicating the shoulder dart, the apex, waistline dart, and so on. And the next step is to take this onto dotted paper. In the next class, I'm going to show you how to take this muslin drape onto dotted paper, onto manila, and then using that as a sloper to manipulate our patterns. Okay? Okay, moving right along. In the last class, we removed the drape from the dress form, and now we're going to transfer to dotted paper. Now, if this was a draping class, I could spend a whole class and show you exactly how to transfer it. But because this is pattern making, I want to cut to the chase and give you the overall picture of the steps involved. So what you would do, you take your muslin onto a piece of dotted paper and you pin your muslin to the dotted paper, and using your tracing wheel, and you see again this tracing wheel has little teeth here, and when you trace all those little cross marks, all those little pencil marks onto dotted paper, right, and then you remove the muslin drape, you end up with a piece of dotted paper pattern that looks like this. At this point, what you should do next is to pin it back onto the form. Why? Well, we want to make sure that it fits correctly, number one. And secondly, we want to make sure that what you have in mind as far as the design is concerned, that what you had in mind and envisioned is exactly what you have here. And if there are any changes to be made, if maybe it's too tight, it's too big, any kind of minor adjustments, now is the time to do it. Okay? Next, we take the dotted paper. You're going to staple the dotted paper to your manila. And again, you transfer with your tracing wheel all this information, all the darts and the apex and so on, onto manila. Then we remove the dotted paper and we end up with a pattern that looks like this. This is a manila pattern. It's a sloper actually. Okay, let's look at this pattern for a minute. So this pattern has two darts. What is a dart? By definition, the textbook says a dart is a shape in a pattern to control the fit of a garment when it's stitched. These lines right here are called legs. These are dart legs. The end of the dart, the very end point of the dart, is called the vanishing point. And in the center of the pattern is the apex, the center of the bust. These little guys right here are notches, and we use our notcher to make notches. And it indicates to the seamstress how to sew this dart, meaning that this leg and this leg must come together and be sewn and stitched together to create a dart. So I mentioned something called a sloper, also known as a block. What is a sloper? A sloper is a very basic pattern, almost like a template, if you will. It's a basic pattern that we use, and by applying certain principles and techniques, you will be able to draft a specific design that you have in mind. Most of you do not have a sloper to use. So you're thinking, well, how am I gonna get one? The easiest way to get one is to buy an existing pattern from your local fabric store. You can look for a pattern that has two darts, a shoulder dart and a waistline dart. In the next class, I'm going to take the dart manipulation principle. I'm going to show you certain techniques so that we can get to work and start manipulating patterns. So if this video resonated with you, I encourage you to enroll in the full course. I'll put the link in the description below, and I will see you in class.